So let's come back to this for a moment. Now that we've seen that, again, the pressure builds up and then it pushes it away from the high pressure areas. And then areas like this might have low pressure, so they kind of speed up. It found a place to escape, and so on. So there's just this interplay of high and low pressure. Even back in the original simulation here is what's happening. When the liquid first falls and hits the ground, it can't go any farther. So there's a pressure buildup here. So that pressure of the ground is basically saying, you guys can keep going somewhere, but you can't go this way. So try going that way, because there's pressure to push these points back into the column of water itself, but there's no pressure over here where there's air, or less pressure, so it flows that way. So all of that pressure velocity interchange is happening all the time, and that is what is leading to this fluidic motion. Things that are governed by something called Navier-Stokes, which are just these general equations that talk about that, about the change in velocity makes a pressure, the change in pressure basically creates the direction that you need to move instead of the direction that you were already going in. I hope that makes sense. So let's talk about it again. Here's another little demo I cooked up that I'm pretty proud of. I'm showing the difference between flip and no flip over the course of the same simulation. So starting with no flip, we again I have points here that show up in orange in our no flip version, and then they're blue in the flip version, then it goes back to being orange again. In the flip version, these arrows are showing the velocity, literally that velocity field that I mentioned, where we take the individual velocity of the points, transfer them into this grid, and then they go back onto the points. Whereas in this version, because without flip, there is no velocity grid, it's just the points. So we're still visualizing them, but just understand also that there is no velocity grid if we're not doing flip. So I hope that makes sense. Again, no flip, these are just points. So they just go straight down. And as we saw before, they just hit the ground and they kind of just bounce up again. You can see that. All the arrows are just pointing straight down. That's what they want to do. Now, once we turn flip on, and this is within the same simulation, it does the pressure calculation. It sees that it can't go this way. Essentially a infinitely high pressure in a sense. There's also pressure if you go back where the water is. So the only way you can really go is off to the side, which we can see immediately. This would have been all these down arrows. If we were to take all these down arrows, this would be on this frame the velocity grid. All of the velocities of the points going down would be transferred to a voxel grid, and that voxel grid would show this. We would do a pressure calculation, which is to say we would determine that there is pressure here. Then we would do a divergence calculation, which means basically these should go in these other directions, because we don't want there should be no divergence when we come up with a solution. And the solution is this. That voxel grid of velocities will literally turn into this. And so instead of moving the particles on the original way that they were going to go, it says, you know what, this is better. Move them this way instead. All of these velocities are then put back onto the points, and the points are allowed to move in that direction, meaning advection. They're allowed to advect, a little bit in that one frame. Now after this, I keep flip on, so it's always doing that. It keeps moving the particles, checking the velocities, checking the pressure, checking the divergence, calculating the new velocity field, and then putting them back on the points. Then it's allowed to go forward again. Particle sim to volume sim, which again is really the same non-divergent pressure stuff that we have in Pyro. It uses the same tools under the hood. It's just a combination of a particle sim and a Pyro sim, which is kind of crazy. So we just keep doing that and doing that and doing that and doing that. And we just keep finding a velocity field that is better than the way that the points were going to move themselves. So as we get to other areas like this, we can see again, the points can kind of collide with each other. You can see how they push each other. Again, just because of pressure. All this is pressure and then a velocity field that solves for the best way. And you can see all of a sudden, once I turn that off, the points are allowed to move. Once the bad old days, where they just keep moving the direction they already were going in. So now you can see points are covering each other up. They're all bunching up. They're passing through this whole chunk here, which had been just pushing against this nicely. Now is just passing through it. There's no notion of where the particles are. So there you go. Blarsh. Not cool. No flip bad. Flip good. So there you go. So that is, I hope you understand that that is the main idea, is that it's a particle sim to a volume sim where the velocity is fixed via pressure, and then those new velocities are simply put back onto the particles. That's it. Easy. Not easy, but easy for the solver to do for us.